Welcome to episode 15 of The Pouch. This is a special release episode where you will get to hear two friends discuss their thoughts on the Australian media's response to COVID-19 and the subsequent toilet paper fiasco of 2020. This conversation occurred spontaneously at the end of our last episode, and thanks to a special kind of serendipity afforded to us podcasters, the microphones were switched on. So we got to capture ourselves trying to decode the current coronavirus laden mediascape in real time. Egos aside, we thought you would enjoy listening to the conversation unfold as it does. And, as a bonus, that it might give you something to do should you find yourself in quarantine in your house, on a cruise, or, at the very least, somewhere with enough toilet paper to get you through the episode. I'm so glad we don't do this podcast face-to-face, Jake, because, gosh, I'd be paranoid as heck. I'm just going to have to live in my shed for the week, I think, based on what's happening in the news.
Yep.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because you've got all this stuff regards to, on the one cycle, the news is saying, you need to prepare, you need to have all these things, you need to be aware of what's happening. You can't travel to this place. These people can't travel to our country. You can't you do anything, go anywhere. Schools are closing. And then on the next news cycle, everyone's saying, look, probably a little overkill with this whole COVID-19 situation. Just take it easy. So you're just like, well, hang on, you were just telling me, like you were the same news source that is telling me to not panic, but to certainly be prepared. And then you're telling me it's all good. Go to the gym, go to your school, go to your music festivals, travel overseas. It's all good. And it's difficult to keep up with it, isn't it?
Yeah, look, my advice is to not listen to everybody all of the time.
Well, now who do I listen to? Great.
No, it is. I completely agree with you. It's really hard. You get one message from the Prime Minister that says, "Look, freak out, but only a little bit." Like when when you're feeling the panic rise in your body, you start to feel the tingles all up your body, and you feel flushed. When that happens, tell it to shut up.
Are we back on the stimulus? Yeah.
When you start really freaking out, you're probably half right. The other half can just chill out and still go to work. Go on.
I went to pick up our son the other day from basketball yesterday, and I was chatting to one of the mums there, and I was like, blah, 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 chatting. And then I had to sneeze, and I just turned around and I sneezed onto my, you sneeze onto your shoulder, right? And it wasn't like a snotty sneeze or anything. It was just a dry sneeze, but it was in an auditorium, so everyone could hear it. And they just sort of stared at me, and I was like, what am I meant to do now? Like, am I meant to, do I just stop the conversation and then do I go and wash my hands and say sorry? Do I get into the car? Do I go and get my hazmat suit? Like, what am I, like, I could feel the, everyone's like, oh my goodness, he just sneezed in the auditorium. We're all going to die.
Yep. Yeah, and it's this funny thing. Like the best science tells us right now that the only way that you can get COVID-19 is by spending about 15 minutes in close proximity with someone, or about an hour in a confined space with someone. So, and when I say with someone, I mean someone who currently has it. So it's
not with just anyone.
Yeah, just anyone. If you spend 15 minutes in face-to-face contact with anyone, you've got it now. No, it's one of those things that I feel that the media is appropriately reflecting the seriousness in which federal and state governments are trying to project, which is one of, hey guys, you need to be really careful about this stuff. If you come into contact with somebody who either has it, you think might have it, or the only reason that they think may have it, or et cetera, is that they have recently been to a country that has it quite prevalently, or has been on a plane flight with somebody who also has had it. So it's
and they're very specific too. I saw a news article this morning, and it said if you were on rows 2 to 6, on this particular flight, which was a bit concerning because it was from Canberra to Sydney. So if you're on this particular flight at this particular time in these particular rows, we're looking for you. We want to speak. So they obviously have some science behind the sort of radius that's involved. There was this doctor as well, though, in Toorak who went to work with COVID-19, wash your hands, symptoms, and he saw up to 70 patients or something like that. So now they're tracking them down. And they're using words in the media like spike. Like every morning I wake up and it's like, New South Wales COVID-19, wash your hands. Cases have spiked overnight, and it's hard to know because like Indonesia's like I read an article and it said Indonesia COVID-19, wash your hands. Cases have doubled overnight to 4.
Wow. Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. You can't necessarily use the measures put out by countries that don't have sophisticated and developed medical systems, or medical infrastructure, essentially. So a country like South Korea that is extremely developed in terms of their medical technology and their public reporting is a country that you can trust on the numbers that they are reporting. Italy, pretty close to being exactly that. China has been a little bit secret coming into it, and I think certainly now the international community are accepting of the numbers that they're putting out. Australia, I think we have been extraordinarily diligent in our reporting of cases where we can either test for it or we were able to find through contact tracing, which is essentially someone had it, and, like the Toorak doctor. So they're trying to get in contact with all the people that they saw. Or in the Gold Coast, there was a beautician, and they saw roughly 50 people the day that they came back from a flight from overseas somewhere, and they tested positive, and now they got to find 50 people who might have it. And there's the thing is, we've reached the point where we have probably enough people in Australia, and I don't want to spread fear here, so it's an interesting one. No. But we've probably reached that point where we have enough people in Australia who may not know that they have the thing, because most people will just experience like a mild cold, and I really looked
into it this morning because our kids, one of our children, I'm not going to name which one, one of our children has cold-like symptoms at the moment. And I said to my wife, I said, we mustn't be...
It's because you sneezed in the auditorium.
I said, we mustn't be too panicked because we're not rushing her off to the hospital to, get her checked out for COVID-19, wash your hands. So I don't know, it's hard to gauge it. I know that one of the stories that stuck out to me, speaking of overseas, was when one of my favorite bands, well, actually my favorite band is Tool, recently went to their concert. And now I've heard that over in New Zealand, what's making the news is that one of the people who went to the Tool concert had COVID-19, wash your hands. So goodness me, it's spreading, all these little stories keep cropping up, and it's hard to know. It is. And when we had a school close here in New South Wales, Epping High, boys' school, I think it is. And they closed. They were only 24 minutes away from where I work. So, it's a bit like, okay, when do I start being concerned? And I suppose you start being concerned when they tell you to be concerned. But yeah. Well,
I don't think that's the thing. I don't think they will ever tell us to be concerned, because I don't think we necessarily need to be. Coronavirus, while this illness seems to, and I can only, go by sort of the best reports that have been put out, but it seems that most people will only have that very mild cold if they come into contact with it. The only people who are severely or who are going to be severely impacted by this illness are sort of people over the age of 65, people who are immune compromised and immune suppressed, and that's it. It even seems that children, who are often the source of sort of fear for pandemic type illnesses, are most likely probably mostly immune to coronaviruses. And that's because coronaviruses in general are super common. And your average daycare or school where people are running around, slobbering, sharing food, etc. All the stuff that we don't do as adults. The kids are doing that every day in their classes.
My kids are using a knife and fork and sitting up at the table. Yeah, come on, covering their hands, covering their mouths when they cough. Yeah,
exactly. But
please may you pass the small sauce container over towards me, please.
Yes,
thank you very much, friend.
Please. Yes.
Learn your alphabet with you, James.
It's one of those
come
things
on,
that would
keep up.
We're not really fearing for the kids at the moment because of the fact that it just seems that kids have this sort of bred immunity by way of the lifestyle that they keep. So it is bad for if you're old or immune suppressed or immune compromised, but probably not otherwise.
Yeah, look, and I've read that, because Australia has quite a sparse population compared to other countries, you might not think so on your way to work going to Sydney, but we do have quite a sparse population, and also we're generally quite a fit nation as well. So, the chances of us getting that sort of pandemic level, what is it? Endemic level?
Anyway, it's already past that, yeah.
But hang on. They haven't declared a pandemic, though.
That's true, but the government is treating it like as though it is. Essentially, a pandemic is declared anytime a particular, one singular illness or virus or whatever it happens to be, disease. Travels across borders. So it's an epidemic if it's within a single population. It doesn't matter how big that population, like it could be all of China. That's technically an epidemic. But anytime that thing crosses borders and creates its own individual epidemics in other countries, it's generally considered a pandemic. And that's why, you heard people like Scott Morrison came out, I think earlier this last week and said, we are treating this like a pandemic, regardless of whether it's been declared, it is essentially.
But I treat my kids like they're liars, even though I don't have any evidence that they're not.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they are. I just treat them as though they are.
Yeah. Exactly. You can tell me the most direct and correct thing in the world, and I will treat you as though you are a filthy little criminal.
Yeah, look, and speaking of filthy little criminals, I was having conversations about this with the kids because we have a 12-year-old daughter, so she's sort of up to date. Her friends are talking about it. She watches a little bit of the news. She listens to the podcast to get all of her news. So she's very, very up to date with everything that's happening. It's hard to have a conversation to say, look, you don't have to worry about this because every day there's more and more news about it. So it's a challenging sort of thing to go, hey, don't worry about it. But I'm talking about it. You and I have been speaking about it for a while now. Like we've got a lot of opinions on it. I could know that I can turn on the news. At what point does she start panicking about it, or is it just about a skill? Is this a new skill that we have to develop in getting a lot of information about these sorts of situations, while learning how to just stay calm and not go out and panic by episodes of The Pouch? Yeah, like is this her time to develop that skill to go, look, this is not the last time that you're going to come across something where everybody's freaking out. You have to make a decision about this, about the information you're getting, about what you do with that information, about what your friends are doing with that information, where you go, what you do, what you wear. We went to the doctors with her the other day. About 3 or 4 people walked in with face masks. And so it's and good on them. I mean, was I not smart for, was I a bit of a dill for not wearing a face mask?
Nah.
Are they dills for wearing a face mask?
Yeah, it's a very difficult time, particularly to sift through what is appropriate advice and what is just silly. what is just destructive in terms of sharing information. And you're absolutely right. Like, maybe now is a great time to help inoculate our kids, pun intended, on the ills of too much information, because what we have is literally information saturation. What we probably had 20
literally,
or 30
Jake, literally information saturation. Literally,
I would say it's literal information saturation. Like, I am sweating now.
That's literal. Hang on, saturation is when something is very wet. That's the literal definition.
If I turn on this webcam,
is
you will see how saturated I am. No, it's you are. Yeah, okay, all right. I concede the point, but I would say, look, it is one of those things that you turn, as you just identified. You turn on the TV, it's all about coronavirus. You turn on the radio, it's all about coronavirus. This is really now about, you get the appropriate amount of information. Turn on ABC if you like, and that's pretty objective. And you get the announcements from the Prime Minister. Hey, be alert, not alarmed. And at this stage, if you want to panic buy, go out and panic buy some wine from the Barossa Valley. Go out and buy for some panic purchase some. What else do we produce in Australia? Go out.
Well, I don't know. You could come up to the Blue Mountains and help us out a little bit up here.
Tourism, panic purchase some.
Come and buy some Blue Mountains tea towels.
Panic. Exactly, some tea towels, or a nice sightseeing trip. Look, really, it's not. We don't need to panic purchase, because, again, even though this thing does seem to be pretty virulent, does seem to have a relatively high transmission rate. It's not fatal to the vast majority of the population, and those people who are susceptible, can take necessary precautions, which are, the same precautions that they probably take every day in just surviving in a society. So go get your flu shot so that you don't get the double whammy, and just, go back to doing fist bumps or elbow bumps instead of handshakes.
Yeah, and if you want to make yourself feel better, have a look at the figures for people who have tested negative for it. Because I saw yesterday, I was reading an article, and it's like, out of 7,000 tests, 6,900 people tested not positive for it, and you're like, that makes me feel a bit better.
Yeah,
it's because at the moment it sort of feels like everyone who could potentially have it has got it. Whereas it seems like a lot of people, well, they had an interview with a couple, I think I'm going to say The Project, it might have been The Project. They had an interview with a couple who actually had it and recovered from it. And, they're just sort of saying, look, we didn't even really know. We had a couple of little symptoms, but essentially we just lived our life like normal. And now we're just totally recovered. But then you read an article which says patient who recovered, died from coronavirus, and you're like, great. And there's all these other articles now coming out saying the scientists have discovered a new strain of coronavirus that stays on surfaces for longer and all this. I mean, Iran are they're disinfecting their roads.
Yes. Well, their roads were pretty gross to start with, so it's not a bad thing.
Well, I agree. But probably all roads could use a bit of a disinfectant. But this is what I'm saying. Like, where does it end? You can find an article that counteracts exactly what you've just read. So you go, great, people recover from this. This is awesome. Someone died who recovered from coronavirus. They didn't even know that they had the symptoms again. They didn't even know they had the disease again because they didn't have the symptoms. Now there's a new strain, and you go, great. So even if I get a vaccine for this particular version of COVID-19, wash your hands, then there's another one.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a difficult, how do we put this? It's a difficult road to navigate, isn't it? It's a difficult path to tread. It's a difficult wall to paint.
Keep going. This is good.
It's a challenging door handle to change, isn't it, Jake?
It's a difficult sports grant to achieve.
It's a difficult grant to apply for in general, I think.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. But this is the nature of all sort of public health. I call it an emergency, in that you can take all of the information that you like, but invariably you got to take the most reductionist version of it, and that's the one that you live your life by. Because I sure as hell, you know, I'm not afraid to go to work. I'm not afraid to get on the public transport every day. I'm, you know, without a mask. I'm not afraid to touch surfaces, etc. Because I have generally good hygiene. I wash my hands, you know, before I eat. I wash my hands after I go to the loo. You know, it's not.
Do you have enough toilet paper, Jake? Have you got enough loo paper in your house?
No joke, Greg. I earlier this week when I went to the shops because we were down to 3 rolls, and I'm like, that's 3 days. That's 3 days. One of my so my wife had a cold and she was blowing her nose, and we couldn't get any tissues because tissues were sold out. So I was in a situation where I was routine purchasing, not panic purchasing, but routine purchasing toilet paper, and there was none in the 3 major supermarkets between the train station and my house. And so I walked up to the front counter and I said to the person behind the counter, you don't happen to have any toilet paper left? We actually need some. And she said, I actually do have 1 packet left. It's somebody
it's like,
didn't purchase it.
It's like the briefcase from Pulp Fiction. Gonna pull it.
But it was an amazing situation because she gave it to me, and then 2 people behind me. The lady turned around and said, "Why does he get it?" And I turned around to her and I said, "I think you'll find I'm at the front of the queue."
Oh no. Yeah, look, and then obviously there's this footage of the 2 ladies going at it in a Woolworths there in Sydney. You know, but I think the more see, I don't actually have a toilet paper story because prior to all of this nonsense, we bought our toilet paper in bulk from this little startup company called Amazon, which I thought everyone was doing. I mean, there's something like they're the most recognized brand in the world. They're the most successful company ever to have graced our planet. And so I thought everyone was just buying in bulk. I was really surprised to find out that people are still buying things week to week, like toilet paper.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, you got to get on that bandwagon. We get boxes and boxes delivered like once a year. Store them in a cupboard, and then it's all done. So we haven't had to worry about this whole situation. But apparently the servo up the road here in Falconbridge has got heaps. So, there you go. Another reason to visit the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
And, so I don't really have a story. But what's heartbreaking to me is listening to these stories of people who are sick or, mothers who can't get toilet paper for their families and obviously fathers who can't get toilet paper for their families. These are the heartbreaking stories for me because you just feel terrible that they're in this situation that they can't get toilet paper. I suppose
thankfully
weird world at the moment.
Thankfully, though, there is other options, such as the waffle stomp, which emerged this week as a waffle stomp. Which
what the hell is a waffle stomp?
Pooping in the shower and then helping the poop go down the drain.
I'm not going down this path, Jake. Yeah, Greg, we just did a whole episode on how to have good hygiene,
Unfortunately, I heard the term waffle stomp so many times this week that it could not stay. It could not stay in my brain. So
I feel sick now.
Yeah, so did I.
Now I'm worried I've got COVID-19 just from hearing that story
because of the rampant waffle stomping.
Yep. Anyway,
oh gosh, what a great place to end the podcast.
Look, I think overall, it's just about keeping up with the news, and it's about this is your chance to filter the news, isn't it? This is your chance to go, okay, I'm going to use some common sense here. Now, you're going to have to go out and buy some toilet paper, and this is my other thing about the toilet paper, right? These companies are going to have to plan for people not buying toilet paper for a very long time. This was my example. Let's say you go out and you buy a whole bunch, like you jump on Amazon and you buy a whole bunch of Milo, right? Chances are you'll probably eat more Milo, right?
Yeah.
Than if you just bought a little tin of Milo. So
it doesn't work
because
with
there'd be these
toilet
little
paper,
gaps. You'd finish the Milo. No, it doesn't work with toilet paper. Just because you have more toilet paper doesn't mean you poop more or pee more. So
Yeah.
all these people who are stuck up on toilet paper are still going to pee and poo. Let's say I'm a business who operates on toilet paper. These people are going, and my metric is poos or pees per year on the average family. That's not going to increase.
No.
Right? The poos and pee metric for the year is not going to increase throughout the year. So they're not going to be buying more toilet paper. Like it's not that sort of consumable.
But there is a good
so
chance
these
that
companies are going to have to plan, like they're going to have to revamp their whole plan, and they're going to have to stockpile this sudden influx of cash so that they don't run out of money when no one's buying
to
toilet
get them
paper.
through the tough times. I suppose what they can do though, Greg, is invest in some good advertising which gives people other uses for toilet paper, such as toilet paper dresses, toilet paper wigs.
Yes.
What else? I could
soundproof my garage here. That'd be a good start.
That's not a bad idea. Yeah. Toilet paper insulation for the house. Why don't they just advocate for public TPing of people's houses? Like do a second Halloween.
Yeah. Bring it back. Yeah, that's right. Bring it back. Look, I think I think Halloween is going to be interesting because people are going to go, well, what are we doing with all this spare toilet paper that we've had since March?
Well, look, if COVID...
let's go crazy. Let's bring this, to hell with the Americanism of it. Let's bring it back in and start, toilet rolling
absolutely
houses again. Anyway, I don't know.
If COVID-19 persists until then, wash your hands, then there's a good chance that instead of giving lollies, people will be giving out squares of toilet paper.
Well, I think that's a good idea. I think that's a great idea. I think, anyway, the last thing I want out of all of this is for the toilet paper industry to go under,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want a monopoly. I don't want a monopoly on just Kleenex just has a monopoly because they survived the great toilet paper drought of 2020.
Yeah, we want Quilton and
It's just
Sorbent.
disappointing, isn't it?
No, exactly.
We were all fired up for a good year, for a very, we had these really intense, full-on things happening at the beginning of the year, and now we're talking about loo paper. Like that's all that everyone's talking about. Of all the amazing things that are happening in the world,
Yeah. Yeah. It is. That's just the way that the toilet flushes, Greg.
Well, yeah, that's the direction the toilet flushes in here, isn't it? Is it worldwide? Is this situation worldwide, or is it just Australia?
Oh, you mean toilet paper?
Yeah.
It's
are Americans doing the same thing?
My thought, Greg, is that the Americans have done this, and then some flipping idiots, I restrained myself, have picked up the news from Alex Jones or something like that, and say that says, look, we don't have toilet paper being made in America, and that idiot has decided to take the advice of Alex Jones and apply it to Australia, and has created a stupid trend.
It's like a fad, isn't it? It's like planking or owling or something like that. Like it's this bizarre trend. But the weird thing about this is that people are really affected by it, like sick people and babies, and I don't know, man, or maybe not babies. They're not using too much toilet paper, I suppose. But yeah, I do know how things work. But yeah, anyway, it's very fascinating. I think it will be interesting to see how this week actually plays out because, there's still more travel bans happening. There's still more news coming out. Like I said, the news this morning said that the New South Wales episodes have spiked. But it's design your own graph, really. Make it spike.
It's here. It's here. And we've got to essentially learn to live with it. Apply the best hygiene standards that you possibly can, and carry on unless you get sick, in which case work from home. If you can, and
but it's a very specific type of sick. Well, the problem is too, right? If you go with the actual symptoms of COVID-19, wash your hands, which is, I think it's like a dry cough. It's not necessarily those of the flu. However, people who have a cold, other people are going to stuff you for coming out in public when usually you might sort of go to the shops or something. Like it's you're going to have to really think about when you're staying home and when you're going to work. It's I don't know. It's such a weird situation.
Oh, it is.
And it'll be interesting
really
to see how it
is.
plays
and that's
out.
the thing. Yeah.
Like, are we just in a
flu season-
post-COVID-19 world?
Well, yeah.
Well, not even a post-COVID-19. Are we just accepting that this is now? I read a headline. I didn't read it because I don't have Bitcoin stocks, but they said, what do your stocks look like 2 years from now because of COVID-19? Wash your hands. I'm like, I really? Is that the sort of article we're writing already? Like,
yeah.
It's only been a week.
Well, it's been a week in Australia, but we've seen for the last month essentially economic declines and, as a consequence, a severe decline in stocks. In Australian commodity prices, really across the board, we've seen the decline in the international share market. So it's not too surprising. And actually, as we're recording right now, there's been a third death for coronavirus in Australia with an 82-year-old man.
Well, this is the thing, right? That is very sad.
Yes.
And I do feel like we could just basically. Like, we could just do a live broadcast every day at the moment, and about coronavirus. And speaking of which, ABC they've gone podcast crazy. They're podcast insane. I love it. They've got one called Coronacast. Yeah, like it's a whole podcast just dedicated to information about coronavirus.
Yeah. Which is
I see that they
for
didn't
a
stick with COVID-19, did they?
Wash your hands. No, exactly. Look, it's appropriate for a coronavirus podcast to talk exclusively about coronavirus, I think.
Well, that's not necessarily my point, Jake. My point is the same people who are telling us not to panic also bring out a whole podcast dedicated so that you can just
binge,
devour, binge information
listen.
on it.
Yeah.
And what for?
Well, for your own personal, sanity, I think, because the best thing that you can do with your time right now is to absorb more information on a topic that you're already oversaturated with. That definitely won't send people over the edge.
I've only got 2 episodes, and they're pretty short, so I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, subscribe to our podcast instead and stay well up to date. This should be your sole news source for the next week, I reckon.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Someone out there feels like we need to know all this stuff.
Climate change. Pork barrel.
Yeah. What happened to climate change? I miss climate change,
Come to Queensland.